Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Welcome to the program. The program is live, which means that you could call in. Numbers to call in North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265-00151. Boy, do we have a show for you today. The American election was exactly a week ago, and there are still people who aren't 100% sure who the next president of the United States is going to be. I want to look at that a little bit because I think it's just funny. It's gotten less and less interesting as time has progressed, but it's gotten more and more funny. So I want to talk about that. I know a lot of people take this very seriously. And by me saying that it's funny, people might get a little upset with me, but that's okay. It's nothing new. People get upset with me all the time, and I'm okay with that. And if you get upset with me, of course, you could call in. The number's on the top of the page on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And, of course, while you're there, you could join me in the chat room. I monitor the chat room. We chat during the breaks. So feel free to join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I'm starting a new feature on the show, and I think it's important that we do this. The new feature is let's try to find universities, professors. I think it's important that the education of our children is a legitimate and a good education. And so Harvard University lost one of their prominent and most respected professors this week. And I think we have to talk about Harvard University and their professor and who could possibly replace him. So that I want to talk about. And of course, it's 82 years since Kristallnacht. I want to take a look at a Kristallnacht and understand how Kristallnacht shaped where we are today, how Kristallnacht will shape where we go in the future, why it is important to commemorate Kristallnacht, the beginning of World War II. So all this and a whole lot more, plus your phone calls right here on Political Hitman. Feel free to call in. In North America, the number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265-00151. Join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to get in on the conversation, join the conversation by calling in. The numbers in North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265-00151. You could join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, where the conversation is always happening and always interesting. So join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. On November 9th to November 10th, 1938, in an incident known as Kristallnacht, Nazis in Germany torched synagogues, vandalized Jewish homes, schools, and businesses, and killed close to 100 Jews. In the aftermath of Kristallnacht, also called the Night of Broken Glass, some 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and sent to Nazi concentration camps. German Jews have been subjected to repressive policies since 1933, of course, with the Nuremberg laws, but this was a manifestation of the hatred. 1,400 synagogues were destroyed. Hundreds of people were injured. People were burned in the synagogues. This was not a riot. This was a deliberate attack on the Jewish population, a deliberate attack to scare the Jewish population, and the beginning of the destruction of the Jewish population in Europe. Well planned, well coordinated, and well executed. So, how is it relevant today, 82 years later? Why should we care about remembering Kristallnacht? Well, we are living in a time where Jew hatred is probably ramping up to the highest level it's been since World War II. We are living in a time where Jews were attacked openly in New York City, on the streets of New York City in broad daylight, and the city officials did nothing. We are living in a time where people walk into synagogues and open fire on congregations, killing worshipers. We're living in a time where all this happens and there is very little condemnation or very little action taken to stop it. We are living in a time where terrorists are being feted by the left wing. We're living in a time where terrorists, murderers, funders of murderer are being hired by universities to teach children how to live their lives. They teach children diplomacy, to teach children politics. We are living in a very scary time. Now, I'm not suggesting, not even a little bit, that we are living in the times of the 1930s of Nazism. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm not suggesting that we're ever going to go back to that time. God forbid. Any society should allow themselves to degrade to the point where part of the population feels that it's okay to murder another part of the population. God forbid that should ever happen again. We've seen that story. We've watched that movie. We never want to see that again. So, God forbid, any society should degrade to that point. But we're also seeing a rise in Jew hatred. We're also seeing a rise in anti-Jewish rhetoric. We're also seeing a rise and a popularity of people who don't like Jews and who are open about it. We see the governor of New York State, Mr. Andrew Cuomo, who unshamefully, he wasn't shamed about this at all, started a blood libel against the Orthodox Jewish community in New York, claiming that they were the foremost spreaders of COVID. When he was talking at a press conference, he showed pictures of Orthodox Jews praying when he was talking about the spread of the COVID virus. This, of course, led to attacks on the Jewish community in New York. Now, Jewish community in New York has been attacked for over a year. They've been under attack for over a year. So the recurrence of attacks on the Jewish community, sparked by the mayor's comments, by the governor's comments, was not a huge surprise, but it happened. Then we had the mayor, who also pointed at the Orthodox Jewish community, sent the SWAT team to a synagogue because there were 12 men praying instead of 10 men praying. Their limit was 10, there were 12. He sent the SWAT team. The mayor was forced to apologize. This kind of hatred ramps up the community and leads to events like Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht didn't start with the riot. It didn't start with people breaking windows and destroying Jewish businesses and arresting and beating up Jews and killing people. It didn't start with that. It started with words. It started with ideas being expressed. It started with people in authority convincing the population that one element of their society was less than the other elements of the society. And that because one element was less than everybody else, it was appropriate, not only appropriate, but mandatory, that that element of society be removed from the general society. This is why there were no protests at all, very little in protests, when the Jews, after Kristallnacht, were moved from their homes and from their neighborhoods into ghettos, so that they could congregate in ghettos and catch diseases and die. And that's why there was very little protest when the Jews were taken from the ghettos, put onto trains, and shipped off to death camps, and put into ovens and put into gas chambers. Very little protest from the German people, very little protest from the Polish people at the time, very little protest from anybody. Of course, now I know I'm going to get emails saying there were people who were fighting the Nazis all over the place. Yes, of course, there's always exceptions to the rule. But the vast majority of the population did cooperate with the Nazis. And don't think that times have changed all that much. Don't think that if a charismatic leader takes power and a charismatic leader convinces the population that the Jewish community, it's always the Jewish community, we're always the scapegoats, and convinces that the Jewish community is not worthy of living amongst the regular community, that this can't happen again. You know, we say never again when we refer to the Holocaust. We say we're never going to allow this to happen again, but we don't take active roles in trying to stop this from ever happening again. And we see it starting. You see it with the dictator of Iran calling for the genocide of the people of Israel. You see it with other dictators. You see it with the UN condemning Israel over and over again and saying that Israel doesn't respect human rights over and over again when ignoring the human rights violations of other countries. The scapegoating of the Jewish community, the scapegoating of the Jewish people, the scapegoating of Israel is all part and parcel and can all lead to another event like Kristallnacht, which will propel the people of the world to rise up against the Jewish people yet again. So what are Jews doing to counter this? What are the Israelis doing to counter? What's anybody doing to counter this? Sure, we lamented. I talk about it on this show. We lament and we cry and we pray. And when we condemn when we have to condemn. But we don't realize that the strength of the Jewish people is not our numbers. We don't have large numbers, but is our unity. We don't realize until we are faced with something like Kristallnacht, until we are faced with something like a war in Israel, that suddenly all the divisions of the Jewish community just disappear. And suddenly the life of Jews becomes important. But we don't have to wait until our enemies rise up. We don't have to wait until our enemies get up and say, we're going to kill you, before we could unify. We don't have to wait to be unified. Why do we have to wait till the gun is at our head to be in a unified nation? I think we should start now. I think we should remember that 82 years ago, the Jews were scared. 82 years ago, the Jews were being attacked. 82 years ago, the government was against the Jews. And this is what happened, Kristallnacht, and then the Holocaust. We have to remember that. We have to ensure that it never happens again. And by ensuring it never happens again, means that we have to actively work so it never happens again. We can't be passive. And I think the Jews have been passive until now, and being passive is not the solution. We can't be passive. We must be proactive in our condemnations of hatred. We must be proactive in demanding that our Jewish leadership do something to counter the scourge of anti-Jewism that we are seeing around the world today. Our leadership has failed us in the past. Our leadership is currently failing us, and we must continue to insist that our leadership step up to the plate and take this on head first. Regardless of how it looks politically, regardless of how anybody thinks about us, doesn't matter. The sanctity of the Jewish community, the safety of the Jewish community depends on it. And once our leadership steps up, and our leadership must be more than just the people who donate money. Our leadership must be people who care about the community. Donating money doesn't show you care about the community. It shows that you care about having your name on a plaque. The people who care about the community should be the leaders, and the leaders should rise up and fight the Jew haters. This is what we need. This is what the Jewish community needs, the world Jewish community needs, and this is what we're not getting from the current leadership of the Jewish community. I'm Howie Silvergard. This is Political Hitman. Join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Feel free to call in. The numbers to call in North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265 It is very important that we speak to our leaders, that we choose the right leaders, and that doesn't have to be the rich people. It just has to be the people who care. It is very, very important that we do this because we haven't done it till now. I'm Howie Silverger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Political Hitman.
I'm Howie Silverger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to get in on the conversation. Numbers to call in North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265 You could join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, where the talk is always good, the chat is always fun. Join me in the chat room there. When the Jews left Egypt, the Egyptians chased them. Moses leads them out of Egypt. They get to the Sea of Reeds. Moses then parts the Sea of Reeds, and when the Egyptians pass through, the water closes in on them, killing them all. Now the Jews who have made it to the other side, alive, realize the miracle and start celebrating the death of their enemies. It broke into song. The song was called The Song of the Sea. Miriam, with musical instruments, took the Jewish woman aside. She danced with them. She sang in praise of God. And we are told in heaven the angels also broke into song. But God wasn't happy. He chastised the angels. He said, "How could you sing when my people are dying?" So it was with this in mind that I'd like to express my condolences to Harvard University on the loss of one of their newest professors of diplomacy, Saeb Erekat. Now, Saeb Erekat knew a lot about diplomacy. He diplomatically arranged for some of the first airplane hijackings. He diplomatically arranged for the murder of many Jews, many French citizens, many U.S. diplomats, many U.S. citizens. He diplomatically altered the Munich Olympics, but he didn't alter the actual games because they kept going. He just altered the Olympic media coverage by arranging for the murder of the Israeli athletes. And most recently, Saeb Erekat diplomatically helped spread the BDS nonsense that Israel is an apartheid state and is committing genocide against the Arab community living within their borders. So I express my condolences to Harvard University on the loss of this profound professor. They hired him for the semester to teach diplomacy to political science students. So my heart goes out to Harvard University. My condolences also go out to the terrorist PLO, particularly the murderous Fatah section, which Erekat was so intimately involved. He was their leader. All terrorists are mourning today, but be sure. I'm sure in memory of Saeb Erekat, they won't be in mourning for very long. So be careful. And I thought that we have to take the time during the show. We must take some time and think about who could replace Saeb Erekat as a professor of diplomacy at Harvard. I mean, the standard is high, right? So Harvard went out and looked for a professor in diplomacy. They wanted somebody who understood diplomacy. They wanted somebody who murdered hundreds of thousands of people. They wanted somebody who held viewpoints that were counter democratic, of course, because why would you want a professor of diplomacy to support any kind of democracy? And of course, they were looking for somebody who had these kind of credentials that they could say, there is a man that would fit right into our Harvard University platform, into our atmosphere here. He would fit great on campus. Let's get this guy. And so they recruited Saeb Erekat to be their professor of diplomacy. And I think it was a great idea. I mean, we spoke about it on the show a few weeks ago. I thought it was a great idea. Then we spoke about Saeb Erekat unfortunately getting COVID before he had a chance to start at Harvard. So those poor students at Harvard never really got the opportunity to tap into his expertise, to tap into his knowledge, to tap into his mind, into his brilliant mind, to get his techniques on how to commit proper terrorism. They never really got the opportunity to exploit the man who is a mass murderer. They never got that opportunity. So I feel sorry for the poor political science students at Harvard, and I feel sorry for Harvard University now to have to go out and look for somebody else. But they don't have to look very far. I found a perfect solution for them. I found a guy. You can't get his credentials match, and probably even exceed Saeb Erekat's credentials, and he's still alive, which is also a plus. So, I mean, he almost died, so he even has an assassination attempt that he could talk about. So he's like the perfect guy. And I think that Harvard University, and I think we should send a recording of the show to Harvard University, because I think Harvard University should really, really, really think hard about hiring this replacement for Saeb Erekat. Now, the semester has just begun. It's began in September. We're only in November. So it's not so difficult to throw in a substitute lecturer. And I think that Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, would be the perfect replacement for Saeb Erekat. I think Hassan Nasrallah is the perfect guy. He fits. He check marks. If you have your clipboard on you, and you look at the criteria, he check marks every criteria. Active terrorist, yes. Active diplomat, well, he is the leader of Hezbollah, one of the largest terror groups in the world. So he is an active diplomat. I mean, for Hezbollah, he's their chief diplomat. You ever see him speak? I mean, he's a great orator. He gets up and he yells about killing Jews and killing Christians. He is extremely good at expressing himself. So I'm sure the kids of Harvard, the people at Harvard who are studying political science, will get a lot from his extensive vocabulary on how to express his hatred towards people and how to express his desire to commit genocide and to murder people. So he fits that category. Well, mass murderer was one of the categories. So yes, Nasrallah fits the mass murder category. So he fits all the check marks in Harvard University's criteria for a professor of diplomacy. So the loss of Saeb Erekat doesn't have to hurt Harvard University all that much. And I think it's important that we encourage Harvard. We should send them emails and encourage Harvard to hire Hassan Nasrallah to replace Saeb Erekat, because it is important for young people who are going to be the leaders of the future, young people going to Harvard who are going to be the future politicians, the future American senators, the future American Congress people, the future presidents of the United States of America. It is important for them to be exposed and for them to learn all the lessons they can learn from mass murdering terrorists. So send Harvard University an email and tell them, express your condolences, because we've got to be nice. They just lost their professor of diplomacy. We have to be nice. Send them emails telling them how upset you are that Saeb Erekat has died, how upset you are that they're now minus a lecturer in diplomacy, a professor of diplomacy, and how you feel that perhaps you could suggest a replacement. You're just trying to help them out. So feel free to send them an email, because I think it's important that we that we do this, that we encourage that we encourage Harvard to keep up to their high standards when they hire their professional staff. I think it's as important. Their teaching staff has to be to the highest caliber. And I think they actually was a misstep when they originally hired Erekat. I think it was a misstep because I think they should have gone to Nasrallah first. Erekat should have been the second choice. And maybe he was. It is quite possible. I don't know. It is quite possible. And maybe somebody out there knows, so you could call in 301-768-4841 or 02-650-0151. Maybe someone out there knows. Maybe Nasrallah actually rejected the job before they hired Erekat. So I don't know if he was offered the job first. I'm not sure. But I'm sure if we send an email to Harvard and we ask them, they'll be more than happy to tell us that, that's a great suggestion. I'm sure you'll get back an email from them saying, that's an excellent suggestion. But we've already asked him and he's already said no. Then we'll know that, okay, so then who would the third choice be? And my third choice would be Hanan Ashrawi, of course, because she supports all the same things that these guys support: the murder of Jews. She supports the terrorist attacks on innocent men, women, and children. She supports the hijacking of airplanes and cruise ships. So she would be the next one that they should hire. And then after her, I would go with Mahmoud Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the PLO. The reason I didn't choose him first was because he still has to leave. Someone still has to organize the terror in the Middle East. If he's living in Boston, he can't organize terror in the Middle East. So we really gotta be careful about who we send there. I would have gone with Mahmoud Abbas. He has a PhD, and his topic of his PhD, his thesis, was all about how the Holocaust never happened. So maybe Abbas, fits even more check marks for Harvard University. These institutes used to be institutes of higher learning. These institutes used to be respected Ivy League schools that everybody wanted to go to. They want to get a degree from, because you knew you got a degree from Harvard that you could do whatever you want. These schools have descended into the sewers of morality, the sewers of our societal system. It is very unfortunate that people still pay $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 a semester to go to these institutes that decide that people like Saeb Erekat are legitimate people to bring in to be professors on the university campus. It is quite disturbing, if you ask me, that the university feels that young people should be exposed to terrorists and mass murderers before they finish their education, and people getting into politics should be exposed to this kind of radical politics. It is absolutely disgusting. It is absolutely revolting. And I think we should send emails to Harvard, encouraging to hire Nasrallah. I'm Howie Silverger. This is Political Hitman right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to call in North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, 02-650-0151.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
Political Hitman.
I'm Howie Silverger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to join in the conversation. Give me a call. In North America, the number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 02-650-0151. So nearly exactly a week ago, America went to the polls. It was an election like no other election. An election during COVID. The COVID election resulted in many states in the United States of America sending their citizens ballots by mail and asking them to return the ballots by mail instead of coming in person, ostensibly to stop them from spreading COVID by standing in line waiting to vote. Now I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here because it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand how Americans could go to Walmart and stand in line at Walmart, or they could go to a supermarket and stand in line at a supermarket, and that doesn't spread COVID, or they could gather in the streets and celebrate the defeat of Donald Trump, and that doesn't spread COVID, but it was too dangerous for them to go to a polling station to put a ballot in the polling box. Doesn't make sense to me, but that is what happened. And because people are home for COVID, businesses are shut down in a lot of states, and people are home for COVID, they had the highest turnout for any American election in history. Today, a little over a week after it happened, ballots are still being counted. Not all ballots from that election have been counted yet. But a winner was declared by the media. The media declared Joe Biden the president of the United States. There are still 4 states in the United States of America that have not been called for either side. The results are too close to call, and there must be recounts in 4 states. So 4 states do not have conclusive results of who won the presidential election. If that is the case, and there are 4 states that do not have conclusive results, and the election process is still happening, I believe, and I've said this before and I'm going to say it again, I believe it was premature for the media to call a winner for the presidency. I think it was premature. I think that they should have waited, as they said they were going to, but then chose not to. I think the Democrats should have waited until all the votes were counted. That's all we heard last week. Before the Democrats unilaterally decided to declare Joe Biden the winner, all we heard last week was, we must wait until every vote is counted. We must wait before we do anything. We must wait for all the votes to be counted. But the Democrats, as usual, changed the story later on in the week. So early in the week, we must wait for every vote to be counted. Later in the week, they were like, okay, we've had enough. We've waited long enough. It's time to declare Joe Biden the winner. But wait, it's a democracy. And in democracy, every vote counts. And it's not a landslide. So, normally when you have a landslide and when it's lopsided results, you could say, okay, one side won, one side didn't win. It's obvious that we could declare this guy president. But when you have 3 states, and those 3 states have enough electoral college votes to shift the winning side from one side to the other, maybe it's a little more prudent to wait for all the votes to be counted. Now, if all the votes are counted, it might not change the results that have been announced already. In fact, it probably won't change the results that were announced already. But wouldn't it be more democratic to wait? Wouldn't it be more democratic to say, all right, now that all the votes are counted, now we could call these states that are no longer in flux, no longer in question. Now we could call them and say, okay, there is a clear majority of people who voted in these states for whichever presidential candidate they voted for. Now we could clearly define that this guy won. So you make that announcement. Wouldn't that make more sense? Rather than the fighting and the lawsuits and the arguments that are going on now. And then the second question is, now if you're on social media, and 98% of the civilized world is on social media. So if you're on social media and you're arguing with your friends and family about politics, and you're getting upset, and you block your brother, and you insult your mother, and you tell your best friend he's full of it, and you guys stop talking to each other. Don't you think that's a little bit of overkill? Don't you think that maybe we should tone down the rhetoric just a little bit? I know people get invested in their politics. I understand that people care about who the prime minister is and who the president is. We saw it in Israel when the Prime Minister Netanyahu and Benny Gantz had 3 elections. We saw the heated debates and the people killing each other not literally killing each other, but killing each other with words, and then friends not talking to each other. We saw all this happen already. Now we're seeing it happen in the United States. Don't you think it's time that we understood that the differences between a liberal government and a conservative government, a government that leans more towards the liberal side and a government that leans more towards the conservative side, the difference is basically in the economic policies. Isn't it time that we understood that 4 years of one president and then 4 years of another president, not much is going to change in the United States of America? Not much has changed since Donald Trump took. I mean, some things changed for the better. There were a few things that changed for the worse, like every president. But there weren't any major drastic changes that you could point at and say, oh my gosh, look what he did. He destroyed the fabric of America. So don't you think we should tone the rhetoric down? Why is it toned up this much anyway? Well, there's a simple reason why it's toned up that much. The media tones it up because the media's job is to get people to watch them. The media's job is to get people to read their newspapers. The media's job is to get people to listen to their radio shows. So the only way to do that is to ramp up the controversy, is to have a villain and a clear winner, a clear hero. So you pit one against the other and you let the people let the people fight it out. The more you pit one against the other, the more people are watching your media. So CNN will take Joe Biden's side. Fox News will take Donald Trump's side, let's say. And the two will argue. If you watch both channels, it's like watching 2 different worlds. And they will insult each other on the air. But you know, and everybody knows that it's all fake. Everybody knows that it's all contrived. Everyone knows that it's only there to make them money. That the media moguls, the people who own these stations, talk to each other and figure out strategies on how each of them could make money and split the market and make money. This is what it's all about. The more eyeballs that watch these shows, the more money these shows can make on advertising. The more money they make on advertising, the more money the people who own the stations make. And the American people and the people of the world who fight and argue and get upset and break up lifelong friendships and break up families and divorce their husbands and divorce their wives because they disagreed with them politically, because they supported Donald Trump or they supported Joe Biden. All these people are pawns in the corporate media's quest to make as much money as possible. And you play into it every single time. People play into it all the time. They are pawns. They're using you as pawns in a chess game so they could come out the winners, and they could come out the people who control the world, who control the message of the world, who control the power in the world, who have power over the politicians because they control the information given to the public. People who control the information hold an immense power. Having a platform that speaks to millions of people is tremendously powerful, because everything you say in general on television is believed by the public. So, next time you turn on CNN, next time you turn on Fox News, next time you read the New York Times or the Boston Globe or the or any of the newspapers, next time you see somebody, one of the media's telling you that this person is horrible and that you shouldn't support some politician, keep in mind that you're being used. Next time your friend, your family member, or somebody you love tries to argue with you about politics, say to them, I could argue politics with you. I could talk about politics all day. But I still love you. I still want to be your friend. We could disagree and we could still be friends. There is no reason why you can't be friends with somebody you disagree with. I have plenty of friends that don't agree with me politically. Plenty of them. You know, we could argue politics, and sometimes I bring them onto the show and we argue politics, and then afterwards we'll go out for pizza. Why? because friendship shouldn't be interfered by politics. Politics is politics. You know, my opinion on politics and your opinion on politics isn't going to change anything in the world. We're not going to change anything. We're just going to get each other upset. And then at the end of the day, we might break up a friendship or two. We might break up a family or two because we take it too seriously. So look at the ridiculousness of what's going on in the American elections. Look at the ridiculousness of what's happening with the lawsuits and the ridiculousness of what's happening with the counting. And remember that the ludicrousy of what's going on is the definition of politics. And that we shouldn't take it very seriously. And that we should, of course, we should do our civic duties and go and vote. Of course, we should vote for the most qualified candidate out there. But at the end of the day, what we should do is take a deep breath and realize that the sun will still come up tomorrow, regardless of which candidate wins. The sun will still come up tomorrow, regardless of who is declared president and who is inaugurated on January 20th. The sun will still come up the next day, and life will still go on. And that's what we should keep in mind. I'm Howie Silvergard's Political Hitman. I'll see you next week.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.